Hi and welcome to the first video in the PDF Scraper tutorial series. Today I'm going to go through how we go about creating models in PDF markups. So today I'm going to be using Bluebeam Review, which in my opinion is probably the best uh, PDF editor to be doing this in. But equally you could be doing this in any PDF editor of your choice. So all of what I'm showing here is outlined in the help documentation for PDF Scraper as well. You can just go help, and then if you go user manual, click on that, and then you can see now that that's opened up in the web browser. And if you scroll down a bit, it's worth reading the concepts section early on. It sort of talks a bit about what PDF Scraper is and some things to be aware of when you're using it. But in terms of setting up your PDF, if you skip to section 2, PDF formatting, it actually talks about how you actually go about that. It's tailored a lot towards Bluebeam Review, but as I said before, equally all this would be relevant to any other PDF editor that you want to use. So effectively all we're going to be doing is drawing markups over top of a architectural or structural drawing set, and then we're just going to be giving those markups a certain name. So in review, in the subject box is going to be the element type, so that'll be slab, column, wall, area load, anything else, and then we can add some properties to those just in this element properties box here. And each of the sections inside this, inside section 2 here, talks about a specific element that you can use. So markup subject, what goes in the subject box, so that's the name of the element, and then it gives you a list of the various properties that you can assign to it. None of the properties are mandatory. They all have default values. So you can easily just put in, in this case, column without any properties, and it'll default to certain values. And it tells you in here what those default values are. This is useful because as soon as you get it into PDF Scraper, you can do optimization and you can get it to size the columns for you. So you may not want to put in a particular column size. And that applies to everything we can do here. So that's walls, slabs, slab voids, various loads, beams, transfer structures. All right, let's get on with creating our PDF. Right, so here we have a structural set of drawings. So it's a relatively small building. It's got 8 levels and some footings on the first page. So what is important is that each page represents the next level. So the first page in your PDF should be your lowest level or your footing level, and then each page after that should be incrementally the next level up, which is fairly standard, but still something to keep in mind. It's helpful if the content on each page aligns with the previous page. So if I skip to one page, you can sort of see that all of those columns and the slab edges and the core walls are staying relatively consistent, which is how you want it. Unfortunately, it's not always the case. So sometimes you might get a drawing set from somebody else, and the content on the PDF won't align. And there's ways that we can deal with that, but it's certainly not ideal. All right, so let's get started. You can go about doing this manually. So for instance, if we wanted to put a pad footing over where this pad footing is shown, I can draw a rectangle around it, go into my markup properties and call that a pad. And that's literally all we would need to do. So we've got a markup with the subject pad, so when that's later imported into PDF Scraper, it'll read that as a pad footing. There is an easier way to do it though. So if instead of doing that, I go into my tools chest, there is a Bluebeam Review tools toolbox that comes built in with PDF Scraper, and you can import that into Bluebeam. So if you go Manage Toolsets, so Tool Chest, Manage Toolsets, Import. So all you need to do is go into the resources folder in your PDF Scraper installation, and you'll find that there's a PDF Scraper Review toolset included in there. And if you open that, you can see that it gives you all of these pre-made tools. And what they do, effectively, they're just doing exactly what I did then, drawing a rectangle for you. Um, but they will automatically format it. So if I select pad footing and draw it there, you can see that it gives it a shading, fills it in, um, makes it look a bit more consistent. So you've got consistency across all of your PDFs for various jobs you're working on. And the other thing that it does is creates a layer within the PDF. So because these things can get quite busy once you add all of the structural elements in, it's useful to have everything assigned to its own layer. So when I've drawn that pad footing there, it's created this footings layer. And you can see if I turn the visibility off on that layer, then our pad footing disappears. So I'll throw that back on for now. And now all I'm going to do is just copy that pad footing to all of the pads. I'm not going to add any properties for the moment because I want PDF Scraper to help size these footings at a later date. And I don't need to be too accurate about where I'm putting them. Um, so this is the sort of thing that we would generally be doing early in the process of building design. So actually, you probably don't know, what the size of these pad footings needs to be, and that'll be one of the outputs of the PDF Scraper program. So you'll actually calculate all the loads coming down these columns, and then as soon as you know the capacity of the soil you're working with, you can actually get it to automatically size these pad footings for you and optimize the size of them. So I'll just keep copying that around. And there we are, done. So I've got a footing for each of the column locations that are in there. I might just nudge these ones just down a little bit. So currently, it only supports pad footings for columns, not raft footings or strip footings under walls. Though there is intention to start including strip footings in it at some point in the future. So that is a feature that will be coming. Right, now that we've done that, I'm done with footings, so I'll turn that layer off. Don't care about that anymore. And I'll start drawing our columns in. So same thing, I'll just go back to our tool set in here, and there is one for column. So I'll select that, and then I'll just trace over that column that's there currently. And you see that's done exactly the same thing as for the footings. So it's automatically named it as column, and it's also created a layer in here called columns. So you can see if I switch that off, we lose that. So now exactly the same thing. I'm just going to start copying that around. Because you can easily copy markups from one page to the next, and these columns are generally aligned up the building, the first page is always going to be the most tedious, and then as you go along, you can just copy the markups up and then just make any adjustments that you need. So you'll note that this markup has the name column. So by default, if you name a markup column, PDF Scraper will treat that as a column over markup, meaning that the column sits above your currently selected level, which is exactly what we want, given that we're at the footing level, so there is no column below this level. So this column over is exactly what we're after. So I'll just keep copying that around. Again, it doesn't need to be too accurate. PDF Scraper uses an approximate method, a tributary area method to find the column loads anyway. So being super accurate here is not particularly necessary. Okay, so that's the walls done. We can now go on to our columns done. So we now go on to our walls. So just to clean things up, I'll turn the columns off, go back to our tool set, and you'll see there's a tool in there for creating walls. So I'll select that, and I'll just draw a wall here. And then I'll do the same thing for the core. I'm not going to worry about that internal wall. It's not critical for this stage, so I'll leave that. The other thing you can do with the walls, so obviously the tool that's provided here gives you a line type markup, but you can also do core boxes like this just with a rectangle. So if I was to just do that, it'll turn each edge of that rectangle into its own separate wall. So I might just copy the formatting from there, and then I'm just going to manually call this one wall. And then I'll also add that to the walls layer. And I'll delete these line type markups that I've got here. Right, so there we are. That's everything done for our lowest level. There would be a slab on ground for this level, but we're assuming that that's not contributing to the column or footing loads, so we're going to ignore it for this exercise that we're doing. So I'll just turn back on our columns. So now I've got columns and walls turned on, and all I'm going to do now is I'm going to select all of them. I'm going to go to the next level, and I'm going to paste them. And you can see that those columns and walls are all still relevant. I don't need to change them at all. But what I do need to do at this level is add a slab. So we go back to our tool set. The first one here is called slab, and all I'm going to do is just very roughly trace the outline of this shape I've got here. Oops. I'll come back and fix that. When you're doing the tracing, you're better off making it larger than the actual shape rather than smaller, because obviously we're calculating column loads here, so to be a bit conservative and have larger loads is nicer than having your loads a bit too small. So you'll see we've also got, so typically this slab is 200. You can see that we've also got thickening areas where it goes up to 300. So all I'm going to do is draw an additive slab, which means that I'm just going to draw another slab over top of this slab here, which is 200 thick, and I'll just draw another 100 thick slab over this 300 area, and PDF Scraper will add those two markups together to generate a 300 thick slab. So before I do that, I might just select that slab we've just drawn, and I want to give it a thickness of 200. So in this box here, I can go T equals 200, and that's all we need to do. Now I'll just add the slab thickenings. Right, so that's another slab drawn over top of our original one, and I'm going to give that one a thickness of 100. So that's as additive with the 200 slab to give us our 300 zone through there. And then I'll just copy that down here, where we've got this region of 300. And then again up here. Right, easy. The final thing I'm going to do on this level is add a area load. So all I'm going to do there is go back to our tool set, and you'll find at the end here, so we've got area load. So if I click that, all I'm going to do is roughly draw a shape around the full perimeter, and that now represents a certain area load. So if I go to the properties in here, I'm going to give it a superimposed dead load, SDL, of, let's say, 1.5, and I'm going to give it a reducible live load of 2. Let's say this is an apartment building, for instance. So as with slabs, area loads are additive. So if I have areas of higher loads, say this is a terrace, for instance, maybe we have slightly higher dead load on the terrace. All I need to do is draw another area load over that particular region, go into my properties and just call it SDL is 1. So we'll have a 2.5 kPa SDL on that terrace. So obviously the 1 here being additive with the 1.5 on this larger area load. And we could do the same thing for these ones. I might just quickly copy it to this one. and we'll leave the area load on this other one just as it is. All right, so that's all I want to do at this level. The next level is going to be very similar. So all I'm going to do here is make sure that I've got all the layers turned on. I'm going to select everything. I'm going to copy it, and then I'm going to paste it at the next level. So there's no change at this level, so that's all I need to do for level 2. Let's go to level 3, paste it again. Let's just turn off loadings for a second. So just looking at this, so there's still no changes, so we can go to level 4. If I paste that, right, now you can see that the slab edge has changed at this level. So I'm going to turn off loadings again. All I'm going to do is just tweak the slab slightly, and obviously that column is no longer required. And it's also stepped in here. And up here. So all I'm doing is editing the markups that are there already, just to make them fit this new level. All right, easy. And obviously we have another column up here that is no longer required, so I'll just delete that. So the other thing to note on this level, we have a transfer plate here that's transferring out these 3 columns. So these columns here end at this level, and there's obviously a couple more columns that start at the levels above. So I'm just going to do the same thing to capture the load of this transfer plate. I'm just going to copy a slab area. And because we know that's 600 and this base slab here is 200, we need to do an additional 400 millimeters of slab. So I'll change that thickness to 400. Right, so now I'm just going to turn off the slabs, and I'm going to just copy these columns over. And given that we're talking about columns over here, we can actually get rid of those columns there if we want to, because there is no column over at this point. The column is under, which we've already defined at the previous level, which you can see here. All right, so that looks like all we need to do for this level. So I'll just turn loadings and slabs back on, select all, and I'll go to the next level and paste again. So again, turn loadings off just to check if there's any differences in the slabs. We'll delete our transfer beam from the level below, and it looks like this slab has stepped in again. So we'll just make those modifications. We've also stepped in at the base here. And this one hasn't changed, and the rest of it is the same. Now you can see there's a few more columns that we no longer need, so I'll just delete those. Great. So that's it for this level. Turn our loadings back on. You will select all, copy, go to the next level, and we'll paste those. Right, now you can see at this level we've got a couple of transfer beams to deal with. So all I'm going to do here is I could do the same thing as we did for the transfer plate. I could copy over a section of slab, give it, a 400 thickness just to capture the weight. But actually I'm going to use a shortcut, and I'm going to put in a beam type element. So all I'm going to do is going to draw a line across there. Let's make it fat and orange, say. I'm going to assign that to the slabs layer, and I'm going to give it the name beam. Right, so the depth of my beam is going to be 600, and the width is going to be 2400. So this beam element is a convenience markup. So when this is imported into PDF Scraper, this beam will be converted into a line load, and the load will be calculated based on these dimensions that we've put in here. And actually that 600 is incorrect because it's additive as the slabs are. So because we've already got a 200 slab defined there, we actually only need to define a 400 deep beam. So we'll do that there, and I'll also copy that up here where we've got another 600 deep beam. All right, and we've also got a column over to deal with, so I'll turn off slabs just quickly, and I'll copy this column to there. I'll copy this column to here, and then I will turn slabs and loadings back on, and we'll copy that to the next level. All right, so there's a bit of a step in at the slab here, so same process again. I'm just going to pull this slab edge in. Right, so our thickening's disappeared, so I'll delete that and nudge it in. Get rid of that beam. Get rid of these columns that we don't need anymore. Oops. And this one. Good, that's all for this level. Turn our loadings back on. We can get rid of these terrace loads. And we'll copy that to the next level. And there's no changes. So this is our final level. So we don't necessarily need to define any columns at this level because there are no, assuming this is the roof, there are no columns over. So I'm going to turn off slabs, and I'm actually just going to delete all of the columns and walls because they're all under at this point. So we don't necessarily need them. I'm also going to change the loading to represent the fact that this is a roof. So I might just drop this down to 0.25, call it a lightweight roof. All right, and that's that. So that's our basic structure setup. At this point, we could import it into PDF Scraper, and it would work fairly well. There's a couple of other things I just wanted to find before we actually do that though. One of those is the transfers that we've put in. So at the moment, all we've managed to do, if I turn the slabs back on, is we've captured the weight of the transfer, but we haven't captured analytically the transfer of column load that's going on in those locations. So I'm going to add a transfer plate in this instance. So if I go into our Bluebeam tool set, if I find transfer plate, I'm just going to draw it basically where we've got that slab. Great. All that does is input a markup, correctly formatted, gives it the name transfer plate, and creates a new layer called transfers and adds it to that. And I'm just going to do the same thing for those two transfer beams that we have down below. Let's turn slabs off and loadings. So back to our tool set. And I'll just select transfer beam. Easy. And then I'll just copy that up here. Right, perfect. So that's our transfers done. The one final thing that we should add is the level heights and the names of each of the levels. So all I'm going to do for that is I'm just going to add a text box somewhere. This markup can be anything. There's no requirements on what it is. But what we're going to say is we're going to go name equals, let's say, footing. And I'm going to call that markup page info. So all we need to do now is give this level a height. In this context, the height of a level refers to the height below the currently referenced level. So in this case, it's the height below the footings, um, which doesn't actually make any sense. So we put that in as 0. So that's a 0 height level. You can also, if you're excluding the footing level from your model, you can actually just model the first suspended level as on your first page and give it a height. But in this instance, since we have a footing level, we have to put the height in as 3. And then all we have to do is copy that up the building. So if I put that on the next page, I just need to change the name. So level 1, and since this is our first suspended level, let's say it's 3 meters above the footing level. So I'll finish this off and I'll come back to you in a second. Right, so I've just gone through and added those markups to each level. You can see it's a relatively tedious process, so we just copy and paste that markup, and then we just change the name at each level and the height, obviously, if that changes as well. So there's one last thing that I'm just going to run through, and that is going to be the alignment that I mentioned before. So before I do that, so often you'll get a level or a PDF page that actually represents multiple levels. So this might be level 1 to 3. In which case we can just set a repeat on this page. So all I would do to that is on this level, I'd just add another line and just say repeat equals 3, and it'll repeat this level 3 times and automatically increment this name. In this case, we've only got 1 level per page, so I don't want to repeat. So to align PDFs, the markups from one page to another, if the content on the PDF doesn't align, we can use something called an alignment marker. So all that is, for instance, a box. And I'm going to make that box. I'm going to use these grids here. So F and G and 2 and 3. So I'm just going to trace a box over that section there. So just to align with those grid lines. And I'm going to call that alignment marker. Helps if you spell it right. Right, so that defines where the rest of the markups are relative to this box, right? So as long as this box is positioned in the same location in terms of physical space on each page, then all the markups will be imported correctly. So all I need to do is copy that on this page and just paste it onto each subsequent page, or any page that isn't matching the alignment of that first page, for instance. So if the PDF content on this page wasn't aligned correctly, then you might have to just shift that box slightly. And that tells PDF Scraper that actually this page is offset slightly, and it'll offset all the markups on that page appropriately to ensure that your structure is lined up when it's imported. In this case, we don't need to do that, so I'm actually just going to get rid of these. Right, and that's the end of our model setup process. So now we have a set of PDF markups that represent analytically this structure. That's got all of the slab information or the load information that's required to calculate the loads on all of these columns and walls. So the next step is going to be to import this into PDF Scraper, and we'll cover that in the next video. Hope to see you there. Thanks. Bye.